Interoperability is definitely a design challenge. There are a number of issues and problems, including privacy challenges, security concerns, but then also the question of how far do we want to go with standardization um, as opposed to preserving diversity. And interop can be seen as a third way between total fragmentation and total standardization. But that's definitely another field of tension we want to watch as we move forward. Every standard essentially has a certain freeze-in or locking effect, at least for a certain period of time. Think about air traffic systems. It's a great illustration. It's highly standardized, it's highly regulated, but it creates a legacy problem. It's then hard, after all, due to the complexity of the system, to move on to actually an improved technology or adopt technology that is just more efficient. Take GPS as a great example. And so we often see that with standards that they have their life cycle, but it's hard to actually then start a new life cycle and change standards, especially in very complex system settings. So that's one of the problems. Another thing is obvious: if standardization means to make or requires sometimes to really make systems look alike, then you have less choice, because what formerly was different is now kind of one design, for instance, right, of a device or application. And so you have less choice as a consumer. There are many instances where you want to have at least speed bumps. So one important point is interop is not an all or nothing characteristics of systems. There are different levels of interoperability. Take one example, electronic health records. Obviously you want that your physician and your hospital and whatnot, that these players and trusted parties have access to your files, electronic files, but you do not want that outsiders have access to it. So that's one illustration where you want to have a baseline interoperability, but then also want to be very thoughtful about who has access and who actually is locked out, even you have a basic interoperable system in place. I'm less convinced that we have lots of concerns there. I tend to believe at the basic level of creativity, human creativity, interoperability is good for creativity in almost all instances I can think of. It's more the question of the incentive to innovate. Now you can argue, well, that has to do with creativity, but to me that's almost where it gets commercially relevant, or and there definitely you have problems, even if you may be creative in both scenarios. But in the scenario where you think, well, my creation, my innovation that I sketched here on paper, that would really revolutionize the entire market we're talking about. The iPod is a great example in this category, right? If you were forced, say through a set of rules, to make this device interoperable from the very beginning, then you may have less incentives actually to commercialize and popularize your creation or your creative idea. Because in the alternative scenarios where you don't have to make it interoperable, you would of course have very high potential revenues to a almost kind of a monopoly position, or at least a very strong market position that you can build based on this radical game-changing innovation that you created in your mind. So that's perhaps the way I would try to answer that question, and separate a little bit between the creativity as such and kind of more the incentive question of investing and innovating in a commercially relevant way.